Hello, I am the Story Girl, and welcome to the story of the snake in the jar. You may be thinking, why would I be telling a story about a snake in March? It has to do with my friend St. Patrick, who, legend has it, banished all the snakes from the island of Ireland. However, this story does not come from Ireland, and in fact comes from far away in India, where there are snakes. An old woman, not very old, a woman middle-aged, but had never been married, had no children, and had just run out of money. Her last coin was spent on her last crust of bread. Nothing more to do but lay down and die, said she to herself, and she went down to the river to have one last bathe in the water. When she came out of the river, she saw on the side of the river was a jar. She didn't know where it had come from. She went up, lifted the lid of the jar, and looked in, and closed the jar immediately, for what she saw there was a snake. Not just any snake. This snake was surely the most poisonous snake that grew in that part of the world. Well, thought she, I'm going to be dying anyway, and it'll be a quicker death to die of poison than to die of starvation. So she carefully picked up the jar and carried it to her house, carefully set it down on the ground, and lifted the lid, closed her eyes, waiting for the snake to strike and snuff out her life. Nothing happened. She looked down into the jar and saw there was no snake in that jar. Oh no, what was inside of this jar was a beautiful necklace that sparkled with clear gems, green and blue and white and red, and was all strung together with chains of gold. She quickly put the lid back on this pot and thought, perhaps I shall not die at all, and carried it away to the city. Oh, she wasn't going to sell it into a market. She saw those stones and knew that the only person in her land who would be able to afford such riches was the king himself. She walked right into his throne room and said, Your Majesty, I just happened to be bathing by the river, and I found a beautiful necklace. It's far too fine for a poor woman like me, but I thought perhaps your queen would like it. Oh, I'm sure she would, but I can't take it from you for nothing, said the good-natured king. Show it to me. The woman peeked in to make sure that it hadn't changed back into a snake, but the necklace was still there. She took off the lid, drew out the beautiful necklace. It's a fine necklace indeed, said the king. Yes, and it is fit for my queen, and he paid the woman handsomely for this beautiful necklace. Well, that woman's fortune was made, and she did not starve, but lived a long and happy life. We leave her now and follow the necklace, which the king presented in a fancy box to his queen. My darling, look at this gift I have purchased for you. The queen opened the box and said, Oh, my darling, it It is beautiful. I will put it in my jewelry box, and perhaps I will wear it to our next fancy dinner." She went and put it away inside of her jewelry box, and didn't think much more of it until the next fancy dinner came. Now, this particular dinner was being held by the king of the kingdom next door to theirs, who was holding a fancy dinner to celebrate the birth of his daughter, who had just been born. The king and queen thought it would be very good to go and congratulate their neighbor on having a beautiful baby daughter, even though this king and queen hadn't been able to have any children, and they were very sad about it. They didn't think that a reason why they should not rejoice in their neighbor's good fortune. "Oh, my dear," said the king, "you can wear that beautiful new necklace I just bought for you." "Oh, my darling," said the queen, "I had completely forgotten about that necklace, but of course I shall wear it." And she bustled off to her jewelry box. She came to the box and she opened it up and looked in, and it wasn't a necklace that was inside of the box. Instead, it was a beautiful baby boy. A baby boy. The queen forgot all about fancy dinners and fancy necklaces and lifted the little boy into her arms. "My son," said she. Her husband, the king, wrote a jubilant letter explaining that he would not be able to come to his fancy dress dinner because his own son had just arrived to the palace, and the good-natured king and queen raised the child as their own, raised him to be the kindest and wisest prince in all the land. And everybody agreed that he was not only the kindest and wisest prince in all the land, but also the most handsome. The day came for the wedding of the prince of the land to the princess of the neighboring kingdom. Yes, and it was a grand celebration, but the princess had a secret. She had heard rumors about the mysterious birth of this prince. So, the very night after their wedding, she cozied up to him and said, "I've heard some strange things. Is it true that you were born in a jewelry box?" "Oh, well, please don't ask me about that. Please don't ask me about my birth or my origins or my parents. Please don't. You will regret it if you do," said the prince. Oh, but this only lit a fire underneath the princess's curiosity. And whenever she had the chance, she would slip it in. "Well, I heard that you were born from a necklace. Is that true? Well, your parents surely couldn't be your real parents. You don't look a thing like them with your dark hair and dark complexion." She needled and poked and pricked until the prince was so upset he gave in. "I told you you would regret it. But I am a prince who has lived 100 years after being enchanted by a wicked fairy to take the form of a snake." As soon as he got to the word snake, the prince transformed in the twinkling of an eye into a snake that slithered out of the room. The princess stared after the snake. "My love," said she, "my prince?" The snake didn't return. She saw now what he meant by "she would regret it." She saw that she must now live a lonely, wretched life. She wept and wailed and cried, and built herself a little black house, all out of stone, to live next to the river and weep and be miserable the rest of her life, for she had asked the question that had chased away the love of her life. She ate very little. She slept on a little cot, and spent her days weeping and moaning and wishing that she had listened to him. Then one night she noticed something strange. She saw that when she woke up in the morning, there was a trail of mud going away from her cot. It looked like it could only have been made by a snake. Well, the next night, she made sure she could stay awake. She sat bolt upright the whole time. She pinched her fingers. It didn't make any difference. She fell right asleep anyway, but when she woke up, there were new mud tracks on the ground. I must stay awake this time, she thought, and so, to keep herself awake, she cut her hand just a little, cut it, and rubbed salt into it so that the pain would keep her eyes open. And at the very darkest moment of the night, into her little black stone house slithered a snake. "Who are you?" said the princess. "Who's there?" "It is I, your husband," said the snake. "I miss you so much, but I can only come and see you at night, and only when you are asleep." "Please," said the princess, "isn't there any way the enchantment could be reversed? Is there any way that I could have you back?" "There is only one person powerful enough to reverse the enchantment," said the prince. "The Queen of Snakes. But she will never do it unless, said the princess, unless she is given a gift." And he whispered to his princess what she should do. The next night she was ready. She lit large torches that illuminated the house, and she set bowls of milk with sugar milk in each of the corners of the house. And at the very darkest part of the night, all the snakes that lived in the river slithered up to her doorstep. She stood in the doorway and said, "Queen of Snakes, Queen of Snakes, give me back my husband." Out of the ranks of the snakes there arose the great hooded head that wore jewels all down the back, the largest snake the princess had ever seen. The other snakes whispered and said, "Husband, husband, husband." "Yes," said the Queen of Snakes, and the princess stood aside, and all the snakes slithered into her house as quickly as they could and drank from the bowls of milk. She never shuddered. She watched them drink greedily, and she watched them slither away. The next morning she washed her face, and she donned her most beautiful red gown and put jewels all up and down her arms and around her neck, and waited. And just as the sun was beginning to set, her husband walked through the door and embraced her. And never again did he transform into a snake. The end. I am the Story Girl, and even though I'm not that fond of snakes, they really are fascinating creatures. If you ever get the chance to hold one, of course, with the permission of a person who knows something about snakes. You can feel how strong they are. You can feel how bendable they are. It really is astonishing. Remember, you are the main character of your story. And sometimes, just like the princess in this story, the choices that you make set you back instead of putting you forward. What choices are you making right now that might be setting you back on your story instead of pushing you forward? Thank you for joining the story today. Bye.